So anyway, thanks again, Heidi, for joining us. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you are calling in from and what you've been up to, and let me spotlight you so we all see you bigger. And if you want to share your screen, you can go ahead and do so.
Okay.
So at the bottom, you see a share screen. There we go.
Yep. You guys can see it?
Very good. Super.
Awesome. Yeah, so again, thank you so much for inviting me to the meeting so that I can share what my students have been up to. So my name is Heidi Taurus, and I am a biology instructor at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. And I am located on the Worthington campus, which is in the southwest corner of Minnesota, right on I-90, about an hour east of Sioux Falls. So just to kind of orient you on where I am located. So I am here to talk to you guys a little bit about the Plant the Moon, and again, what my students have been up to over the last year and what they're currently doing this semester as well.
Could you tell us why you have a photo by Paul Seifert?
Oh, yes. So Dr. Paul Seifert is our physics / astronomy / a little bit of math instructor here at Minnesota West. His office is just a couple doors down from mine. He is very into astronomy, and he took this photo using his own equipment. We actually now have a telescope on campus that someone donated, so he does a lot of star parties, which the community loves. And a lot of times he'll partner with the Bell Museum and also our local library.
That's excellent. We actually know Paul fairly well because he's done space grant activities with us in the past.
Yes, he has. Yep. So he's an excellent instructor and very enthusiastic about NASA and space. All right. So first off, I'm just going to kind of give you some information about the Plant the Moon Challenge. There's also a Plant Mars Challenge, which Dr. Seifert is interested in doing next semester with his astronomy students. I'm trying to push him a little bit into that. He is worried about his lack of knowledge about biology, but luckily we collaborate a lot, which is one of my big key advice is to collaborate with people if you're not quite sure about a certain aspect of this research project. So the Plant the Moon there, and this in bold, it's a quote from their website. So understanding how we can use lunar soil to grow crops is one of the next great steps in supporting our return to the moon. And then they're also doing the Plant Mars, like I mentioned. Through these challenges, they encourage the students to help NASA scientists and the academic community at large learn the best crop conditions to make that happen. So this is a very open challenge, but the main goal of it is to figure out the best factors that will contribute to growing crops that have a high yield and that also are have a good nutritional value for individuals that may live in different communities on the moon. Okay. And then I also have listed here, so it's through the Institute of Competition Sciences, which is where most of the work is submitted and uploaded into their website. And then it's also with NASA Survey and NASA Space Grant Kids Extension Project. But the last one is the one where you guys fit in. So it is also supported by 12 different states and their Space Grant Consortium. And then also Soil Master that sends out the pH meters with the kit. So just to point out, so this competition's really piqued my interest because I'm always looking for different things that my students can do, but as a community college instructor, a lot of things are geared more towards K through 12. So when I saw that there was an undergraduate professional level, I started digging more into this competition, and then I filled out the space grant application, and then here we are 3 semesters later. And most of the submissions do come from the elementary, middle school, and high school. So there is a big opportunity for undergrad professional to expand that area within this research. And these are pictures of 2 of my current teams. So these are my students. One thing that is really helpful is they provide a lot of written material. So there's a project guide, and it seems like every semester they update that and they make it even better. So this semester, it's amazing. Lots of information. They also provide an experimental guide for people that may not be quite as familiar about, independent variables, dependent variables, controls. So that's a really good resource for students to help them learn about scientific design and how research is done. And there is also a coach. So I'm the coach for the team. So there's a guide to help you kind of facilitate and help your students through the whole project. And just to show you guys, if you do get a kit, these are the things that come in the kit. Each kit is $405 unless if you receive a grant, which the Minnesota Space Grant Consortium has provided grants to me for this project, which I'm very thankful for, and my students are as well. But you get a bag of the simulated regolith, and I have a picture of the moon one here. And it comes from the Exolith lab. This year they sent 10 pots. I didn't use them. I didn't know they were coming in the kit because they didn't send them in the previous kits. They also provided N95 masks. You need those to mix up the regolith because it's very fine, ground up dust. So you just have to protect when you're mixing it, when you're preparing everything. There's pH meters, which is shown here as well. And then they throw in some stickers, which are nice. You can put them right by your setup. Other materials that are needed. So you really don't need a lot of extra materials. It's suggested that you have other personal protective equipment. So I mixed up the soil in a fume hood just to help with that dust. Gloves, which is pretty standard in most labs. And then eyewear is also recommended. But now they send the masks in the kit, so that's nice. You don't have to get those. They do suggest grow lights. I have purchased, we had a couple of them just in the lab sitting around that weren't being used, but I purchased a couple of those just to add to what we have. We also have a greenhouse on campus, but our egg department kind of takes it over. So we use grow lights. I also set them up on timers, which helps. Seeds for whatever you want to plan to grow, water to water them, and then any amendments that you want to add in. So I've added in peat moss, just topsoil, and then we use different types of nitrogen sources. So urea, for example, so you can purchase those, or if you have them on hand already. And there's lots of different options. So I really focused on nitrogen sources, but you can change like different plants, you can change the amount of topsoil you add. So lots of different ways that you can set up the experiment. And they have done a really good job of laying out different things in that guide. So lots of different ways to set this up. Another thing that I really enjoy is they have check-in submissions throughout the 10 weeks. So they take a demographic survey of the students or whoever is on the team. They want you to submit your experimental design, both written and in a video, which then they go through and look at those and they can provide, or sometimes they'll come back and give you suggestions, or they can look through and make sure that you have identified all your variables. Midpoint grow update, you can submit questions, they'll answer those. And then the final reports and video also. So that's really nice because it kind of keeps you on task and you're like, oh, we need to get this done by this day. They do offer Zoom sessions as well. So there's an opening symposium. They have some question and answer sessions with the advisory board, office hours. You can go in and ask questions. So they really are there to help you be successful in this project. And oh, keep forgetting to show the pictures, but there are pictures of my students. Here's one of our setups. So we tested, oh, this is actually a current one. I'm testing different amounts of nitrogen So blue is our control, and then different amounts, so increasing amounts from the purple, green, and yellow. With a little popsicle stick. So that's a little bit about the project. The reason why I'm doing this with my students is, again, there's not a lot of funding out there for college age at these kind of smaller scale research projects. It's usually K through 12. So again, that really got me interested into looking at this. But I really encourage my students to learn about the scientific method. So they get to do hands-on research, which is really cool. They're so excited about this that, you know, they brag about doing research for NASA, and they tell their friends, their family, the community knows about it. I really like the emphasis on the experimental design, so identifying those different variables. And then the collaboration part. So a lot of times my students still have that view that scientists are just by themselves in a lab, that this really highlights that they need to work together to create this. And then also the citizen science part of it, so contributing to something bigger, and that knowing that their research may be used in the future. So they really enjoy that. Another thing that I really focus on too is making sure that my students see themselves as scientists. So a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I'm not good at science, or I can't go into that because of some reason. So it helps them to know that, yes, they can do this, that they can be scientists and they can contribute to the scientific community. And then the last one I touched on, so they get to brag about doing research. I've heard that a lot. And then it's also international. So there are teams from around the world that submit projects for the Best in Show award that they can win. So again, here are two more. So I currently have 4 teams going. I have a big class of 42 students. So we have 4 teams doing the Plant the Moon challenge this semester. So just to show you guys a little bit, so up this top picture, this shows, so this right here in the beaker, that shows you what the lunar regolith looks like. So again, it's a really crushed up fine powder, and they suggest to mix it. So we're in a fume hood, I'm wearing gloves, I have goggles on, the N95 mask, and I'm mixing it with topsoil right there. We then put them into pots. So this was last year. Last year I had 1 team. I tried to get students from the community to do it as like an out of classroom type of experience. I had 3 students that were interested, 1 followed through. But at a community college, it's really hard to get students to do extra things, especially when they work full time. The student I had was also doing harvest, so that we had a couple of challenges with that as well. But I'll talk about this semester. So in the spring and the semester, I put it into one of my classes, and that has helped a lot for the time management. But here we have it all in the pots. I do have the grow light. I moved it down so it was closer to the seeds down here. And then there is a 8-week grow period. They want you to collect some sort of data at least once a week on the plants, and then you'll report that data that you collect from that. So my teams, and I think part of this might be also due to not a lot of undergrad or professional teams competing for the awards, but we also had really good plant growth the last 2 semesters. But my team won a Best in Show award for evaluation results, and then in the spring it was for experimental design. So you can see my students in the class that participated in the spring in that picture. All right, so some of the advice, and I touched on this a little bit throughout the presentation, but I really encourage you, if you can, to integrate it into your classroom or into the lab. And this might be unique to a community college, but I remember at my 4-year, I was able to do research outside of class because students might have a little bit more time, or they might be a little bit more interested in doing that to add it to their resume. But just at the community college level, I found that it worked best to put it in with my lab. And it doesn't take that much time. They spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes each week collecting data in lab. Share the project so the community down here is really interested. I go out grocery shopping and people will ask me how the moon babies are doing. So they're called the moon babies down here. And then also I mentioned, so we talked about Paul Seifert. He helped me a lot with kind of understanding the lunar soil components and kind of that part of it. I also talked to our chemistry instructor, Dr. Tyler Wadzinski. He helped me get the different nitrogen compounds. And then I briefly talked to Jeff Rogers in our agriculture department, a little bit about the project. So for some of you, it may be going, if you're not a biology person or a chemistry person or a astronomy, agriculture, you know, just kind of get out there and talk to your colleagues and try to learn more about those different areas. And then I have Miss Frizzle here. So other advice, like anything, there is a learning curve to it. So the first semester, I was very overwhelmed. I struggled a lot. And then now this semester, a year later, I have 4 different projects going at the same time. So just jump in. It's okay to make mistakes. They talk about making mistakes a lot from the advisory board and how, you know, in science, that is how scientists learn. We learn by making mistakes, by not supporting our hypotheses, and then get messy. So just your students will understand if things don't work out. Or I feel very fortunate my students are okay. They understand, you know, this is science, this is part of it. So let's just keep going, collecting data, see what happens. And then I just have a couple of resources. Just if you are interested, the space grant funding request is due by December 3rd. So I do have a link in there if you're interested. And again, if you're in Minnesota, the Minnesota Space Grant Consortium provides the grant, which we are very thankful for. So if you guys have any questions, I can answer them.
Thank you. This is very useful, and you actually answered most of my questions, but could you remind me, you said this at the beginning and I've already forgotten, what kind of a class is this part of? This is an intro biology class, this is a astronomy, or not astronomy, agriculture type class? What sort of a class are you doing this with?
I teach, it's a first semester majors level biology class. So it's just an introduction biology class. And
Okay.
most of my students are not planning on going into biology, but it's a class that we teach on campus. So they sign up for it because they want to do the hands-on activities and the research.
My assumption is most of us know about students interested in biology. In fact, I think a lot of schools have most students come thinking they're going to do biology.
Yep.
I would like to think that we all have students who would really benefit from this, but what questions do people have based on this presentation about who to talk to, how to get going? One thing I think I picked up here is you don't need a lot of equipment, in part because what you're given to grow is pretty tiny. Therefore, you don't need a full greenhouse, lots of space. This could be done in the corner of a lab, but it probably can't be done in a closet.
So I actually have, ours is set up in the chemistry lab on the back table.
Okay.
So it is really in the corner of a lab.
Questions? This is something that I've mentioned, Plant the Moon, as an option, and I know some of you have offered money to allow us to bring in outside schools, but I don't know that anybody except for Thelma maybe has actually done this on campus. And in your case, it was another faculty member, not you, who did it on the campus. So actually, Thelma, 30 seconds. How did it go at Concordia when they did it? They did it one time.
They did it one time. It was a biology professor, and they did plant the Mars.
Okay.
So the regolith was red, and they really liked. They really enjoyed the activity. It's just because I can't force the faculty to do. And I was kind of interested myself in doing that. I have a corner there, So it has to be a biologist or can we?
It doesn't,
Do that.
but she suggested, which is very good advice, talk to the people
Mhm.
who can give you advice if you want to do it, or talk the people into doing it, and you could give them advice. But I mean, you do stuff with iron oxides on Mars. I mean, it sounds like very much up your alley, though.
Yeah, that's the reason why I was interested.
Other questions about this project? Here, one more from me. Plant the moon, plant Mars. Is there really any fundamental difference except other than they just try to make the regolith more appropriate for Mars regolith compared to moon regolith?
Yeah, I think that's the only difference. They just send you a different bag from the exolith. And I mentioned Dr. Paul Seifert we've been talking about it. He really wants to do it in his astronomy class, but he doesn't feel as comfortable with the biology part. So we're kind of working on seeing what we can do and come up with something for his students.
That's cool. I've got a question actually for Eric. You've been starting to work as of late with biologists. Have you talked about this with them at all?
They are, if my other slides that they sort of put together, they are sort of going in this round. They already bought the lunar regolith, and so they haven't officially signed up for this, but it might be worthwhile. Heidi, I think I'll probably have my bio folks maybe reach out to you and also Paul. I need to reach out to Paul anyway from some past stuff, but it might be worthwhile sort of a collaboration in that regard, because I think my folks are sort of looking for sort of like somebody that's already sort of done it. They feel a little bit uncomfortable, sort of, just kind of starting it up maybe slightly. And so talking to somebody like you might be kind of putting them over the edge, I think. So just like, all right, this is fine, we're already doing it type of thing. So.
Right. So this is Eric Egramson from St. Catherine University. Do you mind if people reach out to you, Heidi, and ask you questions?
That's fine, yeah. I'd be more than willing to help or just offer advice. It is very overwhelming the first time. But like I said, they have just in the past 3 semesters, the guide that they provide is so much better. So they're really good about taking comments and feedback and updating things.
A question for you, Heidi, and that is, you said you tried to get some students from off campus involved that didn't perhaps go too far, but have you been involved with any schools? Because schools do this, and I don't know if any schools in Worthington have been doing this, but I'm just curious, have you talked to any schools, or do you think that would be worth pursuing also as collaborations between colleges and local schools, like maybe have a college student help mentor a local middle school team or anything like that?
Yeah, that's something that I actually have been thinking about, because our elementary and intermediate school are just across the street from where the college is located. But I would suggest doing that. I've also thought about maybe doing it with, my son is in 4-H. So I've seen like some 4-H groups submit projects as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be with schools either. It could be with 4-H or Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. So any of those types of groups.
It turns out we do receive requests from people to give them funding to buy the materials, and some, not all, many though, are actually homeschools.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's obviously an important part of the society, but it tends to impact fewer students. It's like, yeah, I've got one boy at home, can you give me $400? And I usually say no, unfortunately, because I would prefer to give it to a classroom teacher with 30 students.
Yeah,
But
sure. Yeah.
so anyway, last call for questions, comments. Thelma?
About the seeds, do they provide the seeds or you pick the plant?
No,
Because
you
everything that Concordia, they did the spinach.
you get to pick what you want to grow, and it doesn't necessarily have to be plants either. I've seen some where they grow fungi, so they're growing mushrooms. So anything that is edible, you can test.
So this is for growing food, but
Mhm.
anything edible. And so, right, they give you the regolith, but pretty much the parameter space, as I understand it, and this is it's probably bigger than this, is you can fiddle with amendments, things that you add to the soil. The assumption there is that the regolith cannot grow stuff by itself. I don't know if that's actually true, but if that's true, then you're allowed to mix in other things, whether it's earth, soil, or nitrogen or whatever. Okay, you get to choose what to grow, seeds, and then you get to choose the environment. And frankly, you shouldn't probably be fiddling with all these things at the same time, right? Lighting conditions, temperature conditions, watering conditions. What am I missing, Heidi? What are some of the other directions people go with the parameter space in which to play?
Oh gosh, it's really anything that could influence how a plant grows. You can, you know, water, temperature, light, any of the nutrients, so any of the macro or micronutrients. I've even seen some where they put in different types of bacteria within the soil to see if that can influence how the plants grow. And they have a big list in that guide, which again is very helpful. And it seems like every semester they add more and more to the guide.
Do they require that you eat what you grow?
No,
Do they forbid you from eating what you grow?
you cannot eat anything because they have not tested that yet.
Okay, fair enough. It's too bad.
Yeah, but some of the larger, so on the advisory board, they have scientists that this is their main research that they do. So they are looking more at, now they kind of know some factors that can influence plant growth. They're now taking those plants and doing nutrient profiles on them to see if the nutrients are similar to plants growing on Earth. Because again, the whole goal is to be able to grow crops that people can eat to survive.
Okay, thanks again. One final comment. I think a fair amount of this stuff is coming to us out of Florida because they have the Exolith Lab and other things in Florida. And my understanding is only recently was somebody finally allowed to take some actual lunar regolith from the moon, really, and actually grow plants in it. I think that was an experiment that's been waiting for decades to be allowed to be done. And I think somebody was finally allowed to do that. I don't remember how it went, other than I think things grew much better than they expected. Does this sound at all familiar, Heidi?
I haven't heard that, but that is neat.
Okay, I think I saw that as an announcement from Plant the Moon itself. It's like, oh, by the way, somebody is really doing the real experiment. So thanks again. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you again for inviting me.
Is there any
Okay.
chance we could get a copy of the slides
Yes,
circulated?
I can send them to James if that, does that work?
That would be great. I appreciate that. And well, I see you put your email address in the chat. I can pass that along too. If people want to contact you or have some of their colleagues contact you, again, we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.